Hello, Dr. Agu, classmates. My name is Monique Williams. We made it to the end, and my project is on clergy depression. First of all, this project has been somewhat, I guess we all were pulling our hair out of our head. And let's deal with the literature review. Clergy depression has been a growing epidemic for decades, and all types of clergy have dealt with some type of depression, according to what I've studied. Now, everybody does not react the same way, and then everybody does not allow it to overtake them, but everybody has dealt with some type of depression. Again, review of the literature review, the terms and scope of the topic. What is depression? How can we define depression? According to the American Psychiatric Association, depression is a common yet serious medical illness that negatively affects how you feel, the way you think, and how you act. So depression can alter everything about us because it has the propensity to really affect the total person. Current situation. Burnout has affected thousands of people, or thousands of clergy. 948 clergy experience extreme fatigue. 802 clergy battle with depression. 1,500 pastors leave the ministry each month due to depression. That lets us know how serious clergy depression really is. Okay, now let's evaluate the current situation. Depression is still growing. There's not enough attention given to those that are suffering with depression. Clergy must recognize their fatigue and their depression. Clergy must admit their depression and seek help. We can no longer, and I'm saying we because I am clergy, we can no longer sweep it under the rug. We can no longer ignore it. We can no longer act like it doesn't exist. But if we are depressed, we have to seek help. Purpose of the research problem. Now, the reason why I decided to do this entire project, first, I wanted to shed light on clergy depression. Then I wanted to show different causes of clergy depression. I also wanted to show the importance of clergy admitting depression. Okay, then I wanted to highlight the problems surrounding clergy depression. And last but not least, I wanted to offer remedies that clergy could use to help prevent or combat depression. Research, aim, and goal. Research, aim, and goal is to point out the significance of clergy depression. I also want to talk about there is nothing to be embarrassed about saying you are depressed. Because being the preacher, people feel I'm the one that's supposed to help people. I'm the one that has the answer, and I'm not supposed to be depressed. So sometimes preachers and pastors and clergy can feel embarrassed or ashamed to admit that they are depressed. But I want to be able to do away with that. Okay, also the aim and the goal is to show that there is help and assistance. You are not alone, and there is somebody that's out there that will help you. And then I want to highlight the dangers of hiding or suppressing your depression. Okay, let's outline the methodology. This is a qualitative study. Qualitative research is a research that gives insight into a particular problem that includes interviews and observations. Okay, the ethical consideration. Respect the privacy of the interviewee. Now, this is what I did. I did the consent form. So the ethical consideration, respect the privacy of the interviewee, confidentiality, importance of signed consent, and bring understanding to of the study to the interviewee. Significance of the study is to show the outcome of clergy depression, different things that have happened, especially for those clergy that did not get help. Also, the significance is to show how many clergy members we have lost due to depression. And also the significance of the study is to show the seriousness of clergy depression. Chapter 2, literature review on depression. Okay, depression, common disorder. Okay, it's nothing new. So many people deal with it. So depression is something that is common. Okay, also, second major disability causing disease in the world. Depression is the second major disability causing disease in the entire world. Depression affects millions of people. That means millions of people have been diagnosed with depression. Depression has had a great impact on clergy and Christians as well. Depression has also robbed many from a productive quality of life. Types of depression. Sometimes it's hard to diagnose depression because there are so many different types of depression. Major depressive disorder, also known as MDD, is an incapacitating disease. Now, you can look for that. Major depressive disorder can be recognized in depressed moods, lack of interest, decreased cognitive performance, vegetative indications, disrupted sleep patterns, and loss of appetite. Now, let's go through some more types of depression. Now, this type of depression really surprised me, called seasonal affective disorder. And this is basically activated during certain seasons. This mostly happens when we're going into the fall season because it gets darker earlier and some people go through different changes. Okay, so seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, is high during fallback daylight savings time, and it has been in some cases been detected in some summer seasons as well. But the bulk of people that go through that are usually in the fall, winter seasons. Now, there's another type of depression called dysthymia disorder. I know I'm saying that wrong, so I'm really, really sorry. Persistent mood depressing disorder, that is also known as that. Mood disturbance characterized by long durations. High rate of comorbidity. You know what I'm saying. So that's another type of depression. Okay, now, depression hits all types of people from everywhere. So now we're going into depression across races and denominations. Okay, depression across races and denominations has plagued millions of people worldwide from all nationalities, cultures, ethnicities, and faith. This is depression. Depression has hit and affected preachers of all races, colors, and denominations in the United States and worldwide. Over 16 million adults suffer with some form of depressive episodes. 18 million Americans who struggle with mood disorders are considered depressed. 10 million suffer from major or clinical depression. Okay, depression among races. Okay. 8.1% of adults dealt with some type of depression. Now, we're talking about depression among races: Latinos, black men, black women, Asian. Depression has affected all types of races. Now, I'm just going to list a few and give you a few facts. Non-Hispanic Asian adults had the lowest prevalence of depression at 3.1%. Hispanics that that have been known to deal with depression, 8.1%. Non-Hispanic whites at 7.9%. Non-Hispanic blacks, 9.25%. Most Caucasian American pastors believe depression was a biological mood disorder. Okay? African American pastors believe depression was a moment of weakness when dealing with trials and tribulations. Now, let me just pause right there, and I want to talk about how depression is viewed in the African American church. Me growing up in a Pentecostal church, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on. But for the most part, for many years, a lot of people view depression as a spirit from the devil, and it's something that you know, if you praise God really hard, you can get rid of it. Okay, let's talk about depression among denominations. Okay, let's first define denomination: a religious organization whose congregations are united in their adherence to its beliefs and practices. And I got that from Merriam-Webster. Let's take the Pentecostal movement, which I just really talked about. The Pentecostal movement is basically Christian-based, and there are over 550 million followers in the Pentecostal movement. Now, one thing about us in the Pentecostal movement, we're highly excitable and we are very emotional people. And again, I already forestated that most of them believe or have believed in the past that depression is a spirit from the enemy and it's something that you can pray away. And people that are Pentecostal, we're very excitable. We make a lot of noise. We dance and we shout. Oh my God, and we speak in tongues. And a lot of them feel that being that this is a spirit from the enemy, you should be able to pray it away. You should be able to shout it away. You should be able to speak in tongues. You should be able to run, and it'll get rid of all of your depression. That's what it's viewed in the Pentecostal movement. Now let's go to the Catholic Church and the parish-based clergy. There are 1.2 billion Roman Catholics worldwide. 40% of the world's Catholics live in Latin America. 64% of the Roman Catholic secular priests have suffered with depression. Let me read that again. 64% of the Roman Catholic secular priests had suffered from depression. That's a very high number, okay? Higher the rate of depression and anxiety burnout was in the Catholic, oh my God, secular priests. That is saying the Catholic priests have had the highest rate of depression, anxiety, and burnout. Okay, out of 358 parish-based clergy, 13% experience burnout, 23% are depressed, 45% are emotionally exhausted. So now we've heard from the Pentecostal movement, we heard from the Catholic movement. Now let's move to the Assemblies of God. Assemblies of God is another Christian-based organization, okay? The Assemblies of God trace back to, all the way back to 1914. There are 67 million members in the Assemblies of God worldwide. 1,200 churches in the United States alone. 230 churches in the state of Minnesota. The state of Minnesota. There are 230 Assemblies of God churches in Minnesota alone. 30,000 clergy members. Many of them have, out of the 30,000 clergy members in the Assemblies of God, many of them have fought with burnout and depression. Now, one thing I need to bring out in the Assemblies of God, they have so much set up for their pastors and preachers so that if they are depressed or if they are dealing with depression, they have assistance for their pastors. Okay. The organization has adopted various coping mechanisms for depression for their preachers. Okay, now let's deal with some symptoms of depression because a lot of people are depressed and that's the initial problem but if not handled properly, can lead to other things. Some symptoms of depression is alcohol, nicotine, drug addiction, emotional eating, insomnia, hypersomnia, and anhedonia. That's just some symptoms of depression, different things that depressed people have known to do. Depressed people have been known to drink and to smoke and to get on drugs. Outcomes of depression. Now, this is one reason I wanted to do this study, because we've seen too many detrimental outcomes of depression. We have violence. Some people that have suffered from depression have been violent toward other people. Maybe they have raped or they have robbed, or, because they have not handled their depression. Another outcome of depression is some people and pastors and preachers have been institutionalized. They had to be put away, had to be put in mental institutions because they have been depressed. Now, another outcome of depression, and it's a deadly outcome, is suicide. People that have not handled or got help for their depression have committed suicide. Now, this is not only in the world, not only with celebrities, but this has happened amongst the clergy. Those that walk with the word, those that preach the word, those that teach the word, those that are strong or thought to be strong in the Lord have also committed suicide. Now, there are different treatments that are available for those that are dealing with depression. And I just think that if people would talk about treatment a little bit more, that they would be able to get help. Even if therapy is something that I'm going to name, but even if you can't afford therapy, whatever. So let's just deal with some of the treatment. Some people have been treated with medication. A lot of people, and even when I collected my data, some people are against medication, and some people say, yes, if it's necessary, let's medicate. So medication, aromatherapy, things like lavender, getting a massage with lavender. Lavender has been something that has been known to calm. Certain scents, certain aromas help with depression. Exercise. Now, it has been known that exercise is something that really, really helps people when they're dealing with depression. I guess the burning, the moving, it helps them to relieve some of depression. Support groups. Now, we have to understand that we are not by ourselves. Just as you might be dealing with depression, or the next person might be dealing with depression, trust me, there is somebody somewhere near you that is dealing with depression. And sometimes being in a group and hearing what somebody else is dealing with, hearing what somebody else is going through, a support group, and you're surrounding with people that's dealing with the same issues that you are dealing with, this can also help with your depression. Psychotherapy, talking to somebody, talking to a psychiatrist, talking to a counselor, talking to a therapist can help with depression. Everybody has got to find somebody certified that's able to talk to you, or somebody that you can talk to, so that you can get what's on you off. Okay? Now, the greatest thing being a Christian that I know helps is prayer and scripture study. If we know God and we have that relationship and that connection with God, if we pray and we read the word, there is nothing that goes on in life that's not already in the word. Even as I was doing some of my data collecting, one of the bishops was saying how even if you read the Psalms, everything is in there. So that can become a treatment. It can help you. It can help you battle your depression. Let's talk about the methodology for this particular project. We're at chapter 3 now. The research design is phenomenological approach, okay? And the meaning is that approach makes an effort to comprehend the perspectives and viewpoints of participants' physical or collective actualities. Simply meaning, when I interviewed people, what they said, I collected what they said and able to draw, just bring the data together so that it can help shed some light on clergy depression. Data collection and instruments. This entire process had 4 stages. Okay, the first stage, I had to do the consent form and IRB approval from San Diego Christian College. Thankfully, after 1 or 2 tries, I got it together and it was approved. Then I had to schedule the interviews with those that I was interviewing. Then I audio taped the interviews. I went through the data analysis and reporting. So the consent form and IRB approval, scheduling the interviews, actually doing the interviews audio tape, and then I did the data analysis and the reporting. Well, I should have said it's in 5 parts because now I'm doing this presentation. Okay, methodology, setting and participants were clergy, men, and women. I sort of kind of went through the ethical consideration, but I'll just briefly go through this. The confidentiality of the participants was thoroughly maintained. Although they signed the consent form, I let them know in this report I would not be using their personal information, their name, their identity. I sheltered them for that, although everyone did sign a consent. Each interviewee was given a formal letter informing them of the information concerning the nature of the research. Okay, if there are any questions that the interviewee feels uneasy in answering, they had the choice of not to answer it or not. Luckily, I didn't have that problem. Everybody answered every question, so I guess they were all comfortable with the questions I chose. Okay, continuing with the limitations of the project. Limitations of flaws in the study that is beyond the control of the researcher. One thing, the limitations that I was sort of kind of concerned about, the possibility of the interviewee not really being honest. Okay, that could be a limitation. Now, another limitation could be my relationship with everyone that I interviewed. I'm surrounded by preachers at all times, celebrity preachers. So those are the people that I zoomed in on, but they are preachers that I have relationship with. Now, another limitation is the sample size. Another limitation was the limited time for interviews. It was really, really difficult. I had to squeeze it in. I was at conferences and at different places, and anywhere I could get an interview in, I was able to do it. Now, another limitation is I'm the researcher. The researcher's lack of medical credentials. Although I have a bachelor's and now a master's, I'm not a medical doctor, or I'm not a counselor or a certified therapist. So that was a limitation in me doing something that I feel personally that someone that is certified should be doing, as far as actually counseling somebody for depression. Financial restraints, meaning if I had to travel and all of that other kind of stuff, which would have cost me money, which luckily, although I did have to travel, I did some traveling to collect the data, I was already going these places anyway. Okay, now another limitation, because I'm bringing out strategies that clergy use to prevent depression, I only was able to focus on 10 clergy members. That's a major problem, because I'm really trying to collect this data and really, make it something that people could use, but I can only interview 10 clergy members. The validity, the trustworthiness of the research is assured. All questions geared toward depression. Credibility measured by triangulation. Transferability of the study can be similar to other studies that may be conducted on the subject. Conformability, study finding will not be altered in any way. Now, I just need to make sure that I really tap in on that everything that they said, nothing has been altered or transformed. Dependability, study findings would be the same if research was similarly conducted. Now, I'm gonna touch on that as well. Dependability is just saying that if anybody else would have conducted this study exactly the same way that I conducted it, and the dependability is that they would come up with the same results. The delimitation and assumptions, okay. The delimitations, although I did a lot of my literature review on Catholic priests, Assemblies of God, I was only able to limit it to the Pentecostal movement because in this short period of time, that's all I had access to. Also, the interviews will be conducted within a restricted amount of denominations, races, age, gender. Let me just deal with gender. I interviewed the 10 people. I think 6 were men and 4 were women. I was trying to make it even, but it is what it is. And then another delimitation is I was only able, again, to interview African American clergy members, and I really wish I could have broadened it. The processing analysis. Interviews will be audio taped and translated by me, the interviewer. Data will be color coded. Now it's coded, we got to get the color in there. I'm gonna put the color in there, I'm gonna get it in there. Okay, data saturations. Items placed in the section according to themes, concepts, and groups. That's the coding that I've already completed. And the sampling style will be convenient sampling. For analysis, okay. I opened up with this a brief description and a brief introduction again on depression. Depression has been characterized as one of the most widespread mental disorders across the nation. In the United States alone, the rate of depression has dramatically increased in the years 2005 and 2015. The growing problem with depression has affected people of all races, colors, religions, ages. In fact, the rate of depression has even increased among young people, youth and young adults, okay? And we also know that even in the clergy, church people, Christians, Catholics, depression continues to rise. Now, participants, I'm going to talk a little bit about the people that I did interview. The first interview was conducted by a very prominent bishop in Brooklyn, New York, who he's a head of a large music organization. He's political, he's just well involved. Okay, now when I read the analysis, I'm going to refer them as subject 1 or subject 2. Okay, so subject 1 was from a prominent bishop. Subject 2 is another prominent bishop from Brooklyn, New York. And although this bishop is a bishop, he has, his background is in marketing, and he conducts numerous counseling sessions with his parishioners as well as individuals in the community. He has a Master's of Arts degree in religion. Subject number 3 is the wife of subject number 2. And she has a BS in psychology and an MA in human services as well as an MED in school counseling. This is my first female interview. She presently works as an instructor for social services, which includes vocational counseling. Subject number 4 is a well-known pastor that has traveled the country extensively preaching and teaching. He brought an entirely new outlook on depression and some of the questions that were posed. He gave some interesting answers. Okay, although he's not formally educated in counseling, he is certified to do so. I chose him to be a part of this study because he is under the age of 40. Not only did I want men and women, but I was trying to get different age groups so I can get a basic idea of how younger preachers and how older preachers and middle-aged preachers view depression. Subject number 5 is a pastor as well as an assistant principal in the Department of Education in Brooklyn, New York. He has a doctorate degree in education and has conducted various counseling sessions with adults and children. Subject number 6 is a young 23-year-old preacher that graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in public relations. He is presently attending school, studying for his MA in leadership and teaching. He works closely with his bishop and serves as millennial leader at his church. He also travels extensively, preaching and teaching at numerous conventions and conferences. Subject number 7 is a retired pastor with 52 years of ministry under his belt. He comes from a long line of preachers in his family, stemming from his father. He has uncles that are preachers and brothers that are preachers. He attended various colleges and seminaries before completing his master's and doctorate degree. Subject number 8 is a female minister and serves administratively under her bishop. Okay, she works closely with many parishioners and is instrumental in spreading and organizing various programs. Subject number 9 is a middle-aged female preacher that has been preaching and teaching in prisons and halfway houses for several years. She is presently working on her PhD in education. Subject number 10, last but not least, is another middle-aged female preacher that has preached on major platforms around the country. She has been a keynote speaker for various women and youth conferences with an educational background in Christian counseling. She is presently pursuing her doctorate of divinity. I'm just going to go through the questions that I ask, and in this analysis, I only concentrated on the questions that the interviewees had similar answers and that thought processes were somewhat the same. How is depression viewed in the African American church? Out of the 10 people that I've interviewed, all of them had a common theme, and that they said depression in the African American church is viewed as a spirit from the devil or something demonic. Although many of the clergy members gave the same reply, I was enlightened to hear the explanations they offered afterwards. Subject number 1 said depression is from the enemy, but can also be a chemical imbalance, and when a person takes their meds, it can be controlled. He also said it is important that the church has the ability to decipher between whether it's a spirit or a chemical imbalance so they can know how to help those that are suffering with depression. Subject number 2 spoke about it and said that depression is viewed in the African American church as a spirit and is mostly shunned, but it needs to be dealt with, and people that are depressed and care enough to see the real reason they are depressed. Subject number 4 said, I believe the perception of depression in the African American church comes off as demonic and is looked at as a spiritual outlook and something that is viewed more philosophical rather than psychological. Subject number 5 said it has been viewed as some sort of demon, but I think it's becoming better viewed. Years ago, it was a taboo and people didn't talk about it much. Subject number 6 said, I think it depends. So like, I know some may say it's not talked about, but I will say that it is. Okay, I would say it's dealt with in many different ways. I think the older generation probably saw it as mostly spiritual and is something that can that you can shake off. Now it's more common and addressed than it was before. Now this is one of our young clergy, 23-year-old clergy members. Okay, subject number 10 spoke about the way the church of old felt that you were allowing the devil to infiltrate your mind and life if you are depressed. She also shared how they felt you were not spiritually strong if you were depressed. Okay, findings. Strategies clergy can use to prevent depression. While just about all the interviewees believe that everyone deals with some level of depression, some have expressed the fact that they do not allow it to overtake their mind or way of thinking. I can remember even in subject number 1 how he was saying he does not allow the depression to overtake him. If he can't change the situation, he doesn't let it get to him. He puts it in the hands of God and he leaves it there. Subject number 2, all clergy have had bouts with depression but don't have to dwell there. So subject number 2 is saying you have to control your mind, and you cannot allow when the depression comes over you, you can't allow your mind to stay there and dwell on what you're going through. Preachers must understand that you are not the only one. Then they must understand they can't allow themselves to live in their depression. Pastors have to find what makes them happy outside the church. Now, one thing I want to talk about that when I asked this question, that every preacher said just about, they said that outside of prayer, reading the Bible, preachers have to have an outlet. Most preachers, all they do is church, 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 and more church. But you have to find a hobby. I'm not sure which subject said it, but one of them said as he hits the ball, he imagines that he's hitting his depression and whatever's bothering him, he's taking it even out on the golf ball. One subject number 9 talked about getting manicures and pedicures and massages and just going to the spa. Having a you day where you escape everything and just clear your mind of everything. So sometimes going to the spa can help you to relieve stress. The more you're connected to God, the more you pray, the more you seek Him, the easier it can become. The easier, and it can soothe it, and it can ease it. Another question I asked, what are your thoughts about being medicated for depression? Just about all of them agreed that medication is okay. Medication is okay. I'm going to read what I wrote. When I asked this particular question, I was somewhat surprised that the responses were 90% in agreement for people and clergy being medicated. Now, the one person, it was one, and this was the youngest clergy member, the 23-year-old, did not agree with them being medicated because he had a situation with a family member where they gave them medication for depression and they really were not depressed. So he was the only one that basically said he didn't agree. What do you think about therapy as a treatment? Now, this was another question where everyone, all of the interviewees, felt that therapy was ideal for depression. Subject number 5 said he believed that therapists should be Christians only. Now, that's where the problem came in. Although they all believed that therapy is good for as a treatment for depression, one of the subject number 5 felt like the therapist needs to be a Christian therapist. And everybody else just said, listen, therapy is therapy, whether you're a Christian or whether not. Just get the help. Just get a therapist, a psychiatrist, a counselor, somebody that can help you. Now, chapter summary, I've gone through so much already at the end of chapter 4. During one of the interviews, I was shocked when one of the pastors disclosed the fact that he has and is still dealing with depression. That really surprised me because I did not expect that. I kept a straight face. I didn't flinch. I didn't give an opinion. But I was sort of glad that he was able to say that to me, because I feel if he's able to say it to me, that maybe he's able to get the help that he needs. Now let's go to chapter 5 again. Let's just talk a little bit about depression. Depression has come to be one of the deadliest diseases in the world today. It has affected people of all races, colors, ethnicities, and backgrounds. I'm just going to go through a few of the research questions, all of the research questions, the other ones that were not, that people just didn't agree. Okay. These 9 questions were used to build and gather data for this project. Some of the responses, which were highlighted in the findings, were similar, while others had contrasting replies. In this chapter, I will list some of the reactions that were not included in analysis. How do you define depression? Subject number 3 said depression is losing control of a situation and feeling that there are no options, being very frustrated. How do you recognize depression in someone? Subject number 1, I recognize depression in others when they are constantly acting out of their normal character. How do people get past the shame associated with depression? I ask this question because, again, a lot of people are made to feel embarrassed to say that they are depressed. Subject number 2 said, I think church as a whole has an issue with addressing emotions and the emotional part of being. I think part of this of it is changing the stigma and understanding behind depression. And I'm just going to go real quickly through the rest of the questions. How is depression viewed in the African American church? What strategies do you offer your parishioners when they disclose their own personal bouts with depression? What are your thoughts about being medicated for depression? Many professionals require therapy to treat depression. What do you think about therapy as a treatment? Last question was, what are the biblical viewpoints on depression? And of course, people gave stories like David, Jeremiah, those that were feeling despair and wanted to give up. We know Jeremiah was discouraged and sat under the tree and he didn't want to preach anymore. David got to the place when the armies were coming against him in Ziklag, and he had to encourage himself in the Lord. So, of course, every preacher had something biblical to say about depression. Suggestive research. Depression is something that is somewhat characterized as a taboo, and many don't like or are uncomfortable about talking about it. However, depression is real. Suggested research. I think a lot more research needs to be done, not only on depression for people, but clergy depression. It's not getting smaller, but it is constantly growing, and more information and data is needed. My concluding thoughts. Depression is a subject that that no one will ever have all the answers to. There needs to be continual study and investigation on depression. Although there are a lot of professionals that are available to help, that there has to be more. We need more. We need more people. We need more professionals. We need people that will talk about it, that will give other suggestions, not just for the average person, but for as clergy as well. Tell them what you can do and let them know you're still saved if you go to the spa, and you still love Jesus if you go to the pool. There are a lot of things that growing up, a lot of people were not allowed to do, but if you can find a hobby and do it, and I think the church needs to bring that out more, that it's okay for you to do these things. I'm down to my last slide, and we're talking about areas for further research, okay? Depression in all clergy, not just Christians, but Muslims. I don't know if they call their people clergy, but Buddhists, we need to understand depression in them as well. Depression in those that are up and coming to be preachers and be pastors, that it needs to be recognized and talked about and treated. So those that are up and coming will know, I will deal with things, but I know I have a remedy, or I know about treatment. Other suggested strategies to prevent depression needs to be listed. There needs to be further research on depression in youth and young adults in the church. Now, also further research, how can depression be recognized in preachers and or parishioners? Okay, another thing, what type of medications are available that are not addictive? Now, I'm not sure if that's anything out there or if that's possible, but if there's a medication that people can take that they won't become addicted to the drug, then I think that needs to be brought out, okay? What are some other treatments that are available for clergy that are dealing with depression? Further research needs to be done on that. Last but not least, biblical viewpoints on depression should be researched so clergy can understand that whatever they are facing, the Word of God has the answer and solution. Well, I thank you for this time. I thank you. I know mine was a little lengthy. All of my classmates know I talk a lot. I love doing this. This is my favorite. Presentations have always been my favorite. Again, I want to say thank you to my professor. Thank you to San Diego Christian College. And I hope you learned something from my presentation. Thank you and God bless.